The media is mind control. Got your attention? Good. That's what this entire channel's all about. And it was what my 2020 show was about as well, that I never got to do a full tour of because of global circumstances that I think were an entire conspiracy to stop me from touring. So, you are going to get the full, well, not full, a lot of it is edited out for obvious reasons that we can't air on YouTube because a lot of it is really risque, but you're getting most of it because I think it's a very important message. And I think that this is as crystallized as I have ever made it. If you'd like to see the full risque unedited version, that's behind our Patreon. That's a reason that you should sign up, but it's not the only reason. You also get a bunch of videos before everyone else does. So get in the looky-loo. You also get videos that we never publish on the YouTube channel. You also get Q&As. We have a bunch of bonus features that you can sign up for, and not only getting that extra content, you are helping out this channel with its main mission, which is to counter exactly what you're about to see. I truly think this is the crux that is affecting every Western democracy across the planet, truly crippling it. So enjoy the show for free. The reason I decided to release this one is because I never got to finish doing the entire tour of it, and there have been a bunch of people clamoring to see it. If you'd like to see my current show, tickets at friendlyjordies.com. Enjoy!
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Cheers, Newcastle. It's not a pleasure to be here. Well, last time I was here, I was walking down the street and someone chucked a bottle at me. Isn't that fucked? And no one here cares. Everyone's like, yeah, the Newcastle handshake. This isn't a conversation, but all right, cool. Dude, that's the other thing that happens in Newcastle as well. The whole time people are like, I don't agree with that point. Well, you're a meth head, so, like, does it matter? Dude, did he just nod at that being like, yep, fair point. I do a lot of meth, yep. You don't have any, do you? All right. I reckon that sums up Newcastle in a nutshell. Newcastle, if hipsters were on meth. All right, now, I'm here to scare you. I'm going to put you into a deep pit of despair and make you question everything you thought you knew was real. This is the TED Talk equivalent of listening to Linkin Park for the first time. Do you remember that? Do you remember listening to that when you were 12? Wow, an entire album of telling your mum to fuck off. They should have called themselves, what do you mean you forgot to get Yogos at the shops? For years now, I've been staring into the deep, invisible abyss that is media bias. My only reprieve is occasionally trying to film a viral video like when I drank my editor's bathwater. Yeah, that was a fucked day. You know how close that is to his cock? He is a fat Scottish man. It's like if Powerade released a flavour called Haggis Blast. And I've come across some sentences that have haunted me, and not in a possessed doll sort of way either, more an impending dread, like the sneaking suspicion I have that maybe the reason Australia voted against monarchy is they thought it'd put the carpet court jester out of a job. Wouldn't that be amazing if that was the reason? They heard Malcolm Turnbull say, this is a debate about values. Values? Where have I heard that before? And, oh my God, he tried to warn us! Here's the sentence. Here's how I can sum up the 10 years that I've been looking into this. You ready? The media is mind control. Yeah, okay. Why did you come to this show? She already knows. She's just being like, yeah. Because we love you. Oh, you guys are all right. I gotta say, though, it's the same thing as just like my niece who's like 3 being like, show me Toy Story again. But like... That's very... Dude, you guys, like, you get it. Good on you for doing that. You're here for maths. Talk about Bryce! Fuck, it's hard to impress Gen Y. Have you noticed how schizophrenic all of my content is? Just like, we're doing maths today. Hey, there's this kid from high school. Hey, your penalty rates are going away. Oh, now we're just talking about bogans. Yeah, like it's just that all the time. You just have to do it to get anyone to pay attention anymore. Because, dude, no one's... You know how easy, like, fucking Gen Z and Gen Y are? They look at YouTube videos of the universe and they're not impressed. I showed my friend the other day one. This is how it starts. This is our sun. And this is the biggest sun we know of. You know what his response to that was? Quote, so I expected it to be big from the title. People are always saying to me, oh no, what if it's about, the press is there to inform the public, or, maybe it's there to make money. You do not set up a media empire if you want to make money. If you have hundreds of millions of dollars to throw around, you chuck it at telecommunications or arms, or if you're an old Chinese lady that owns a corner store, names. You reckon? Tash Sultana moves next door, you're a millionaire overnight. This was her performing at Splendour in the Grass. After years of studying this subject, I think that this sentence, and it's good that you picked it up as well, I really do think that sums it up. And I'm just going to explain it to you in the only way I know how, which is intersplicing it with such cutting-edge observations as, do you remember Rove Live? How good would it be if they filmed it underwater and called it Rove Dive? Because I've got the time, start off in the Han Dynasty. Not much has changed. In fact, I swear I saw that exact guy at a gaming lounge the other day. Because if he was alive today, he would be sick at Age of Empires. His entire job was to expand the Han Empire. He did so to the level that they could no longer reach word of mouth through the empire. It got that big. Did you know that's where the phrase Chinese whispers originated from? Because I don't, I just made that up. But to counter that, the Chinese administration at the day decided to invent newspapers so that they could get to the nether regions the emperor's message. That's the inception of news. It was a tool invented by the elite to propagate their interests. Don't let your parents say, oh, the news used to be a lot better in the 80s. Why? Because it was impossible to tell the difference between Ray Martin and a Lego man? It is an improvement. It's probably the only reason they put him on assignment in Indonesia. They wanted to see if he'd still be smiling if his head was taken off. Well, you're offended by that. Okay, well, what about this? Fast forward to Woodrow Wilson's presidency, who missed his calling in life, Colgate model. And he was faced with a conundrum. Because he had promised not to enter the US into World War I, but his donors had discovered that war is even more profitable than Turkish grandmas selling gozleme or gozlemi or however the fuck you pronounce it. I wish she was our Minister for the Environment instead of Susan Ley. Then at least the incompetence would be charming. Madam, there's been another fish kill in the Darling. What's that, darling? You want a fish cake? You know, when I first tried this out in Adelaide, that got silenced night after night, and I was just like, no, that's a fucking killer. I'm leaving that in. I was trying to figure out why. flying back, saw an empty riverbed, and then I realised, oh, that's right, it's because the Darling doesn't flow there anymore. Oh, eat shit, downstreamers. So what he did was he invented the Ministry of Information. How Orwellian is that? It's the first propaganda outlet of a modern government, and they called it the Ministry of Information. In it was such geniuses as Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays is Sigmund Freud's nephew. That's the least impressive fact about him. He died in 1995. He looked like that back then. What did he look like when he carked it? This? You know, after he set up the propaganda model, he went on to set up modern day marketing and was the guy that came up with product placement in movies. There's this brilliant film from the 70s called Soylent Green. It's about overpopulation leading to an ecological collapse. So if you can't find the original, just watch the remake, Bondi Rescue. And in it is such a masterful scene for flogging cigarettes. Charlton Heston, coolest motherfucker on earth. He just starts puffing away, talking about how awesome cigarettes are. It was so good that I went out and bought a pack out of respect. I didn't care it had the dead baby on the front. Yeah. Dude, that's how fucking powerful he is. Charlton Heston's coolness overrode the dead baby. I was looking at it being like, sucks to be you, baby. Walter Lippmann, another genius, forgotten by the history books except to a few select academic circles, where after setting up the propaganda model, he became renowned for being the father of modern journalism. Oh, and you thought it was Wale Dale. Fuck, I hate that man. He's such a cunt, isn't he? He is. I hate how this walking Sydney Morning Herald, who feeds his superiority complex by hanging around a pear and a chimp, is regarded as the intellectual of television. Smugness doesn't suit this nation. I tell you what was better. How much better was it when the smartest people on television were sports commentators like Sterlo, eh? Exactly. Where's his fucking university tour? Mate, I'll tell you what, when you see those ashen bodies in Vesuvius, you think to yourself, it is a ripe old shame that they can't be used in a scrum. After the war was over, after the war was finished, the Ministry of Information had all these tools at their disposal for flipping public opinion on a dime. And they decided to start using it on the domestic population during peacetime. You know who they decided was their first enemy after the Germans? Unions. Look at them. These were bricklayers. Look at them, all these gentlemen in their Sunday best. If they were scared of brickies back then, can you imagine how fucking terrified they'd be of brickies today? $1919. The year of the infamous prohibition laws. It saw a banning of alcohol and thus an explosion in gambling. And, oh, sorry, that's New South Wales today, but... It was also the year of the Great Steel Strikes. 350,000 steelworkers marched off the job, which I think the enormity of that can be best summed up by my hairdresser when I told her that, and she said, wow, that's so many. And she was right. Steel America could not hire enough strikebreakers to bust that many heads open, so they decided to go with one of these newfangled PR firms. Well, back then they were called propaganda. Dig this. PR got its name changed from propaganda. It was a little propaganda tool because the word started getting a little bit dirty. But back then they at least had the decency to call themselves things like Bernays and Sons Propaganda Concern. A far cry from all the dickheads on fucking Gruen that are like, run like, ooh, oopsie daisy, all those agencies. Honestly, if I was God, I'd give them all the plague. Every last one of them. Except that woman from New Zealand. I'd turn her into a pillar of salt because that's how every Kiwi deserves to leave this planet, being sprinkled on fish and chips. What Walter Lippmann and Edward Bernays discovered is that the best way to win an argument, this is one of their primary tools, the best way to win an argument is to not have the argument in the first place. Instead, what you do is you accuse your opponent of being a couple of key emotive words. Then you don't have to have the argument and you win automatically. This is why the bane of my existence is all of these enlightened intellectuals online, aka fat neckbeards on Reddit. See? You know why no one ever laughs at that? Because a quarter of you are that man. And everyone does it, don't they? Everyone online is always accusing everyone else of being a socialist, centrist, Nazi, cumberbitches. I'm a conservative. Yeah, what do you want to do? You want to protect the environment? No, I want to burn down a gum forest, watch a koala run away in slow motion, race it against a sloth, and oh my God, the koala's faster. That's the only reason I became premier, just to do that, bros. They're fucking meaningless. Meaningless terms. This isn't my theory, this is theirs. They used it to great effect after the war. Oh, Workers' Party's going to win in Italy, are they? We'll call them communists. And, oh, the unions want an 8-hour workday? Well, you turn that 8 around and you have infinite communism. I do like using the word union. Because I just know that any time anyone utters that word across this great brown land, you have awoken Howard out of a deep slumber. Think about how fucking insane it is to call unions communist. You know they're the only reason we didn't have a communist uprising in this country, because they made conditions for the working class so favourable that when communist parties tried to sell the workers' paradise, the workers were like, what, workers' paradise? Mate, I already have the entire DVD box set to Mother and Son. Such a good show. Mum! Anyway, look. They ran a bunch of Tad-San commie articles in the steel strikes. This is what Bernays and Lippmann started to do, running all these like, oh, communists to the steel strikes in the articles. Dude, it was so effective that the public became Steel America's strike breakers. They started beating the unionists in the streets. I think a big part of that was the fact it was 1919, and look at how fucked these guys look. And you reckon if you asked them what they had for dinner last night? Glass! You think even Vulcan from Gladiator would be like, fuck, I'm gonna sit this one out, eh? $112 million lost in wages. 20 people died in the conflict. It was one of the biggest strikes in human history, and the unions got nothing. Not one concession. You don't get results like that from strike breakers. Now, this is in 1932. This is something they don't teach you in the history books. Walter Lippmann was bragging to the industrial titans of America at the time. I think it was about an audience of 100 people, and he was saying the methods of propaganda uncovered during the war have not been forgotten. On the contrary, they've been improved and expanded on. We are now at the point where it is naive to believe in the dogma of democracy. Now, this is the key point. Listen to this. What we now live in is a guided democracy. That was in 1932. Can you imagine how much more precise the science of propaganda is today? Do you understand why that is the most important euphemism in history apart from, I call it cosy? You understand why looking into this subject for a while you start wondering, it's like wearing a giant sweater and thinking, why is this sweater so itchy? Better have a closer look and, it's just trillions of microscopic paedophile Dennis Fergusons. Molesting each and every one of my skin pores. You seem upset by that. Don't worry, it's actually very innocent, because look, there's Wally. What the fuck? Dude, you made that joke more fucked than it had to be. It used to anger me so much when I get messages like, you can tell the reason this shill loves unions is because he's never worked a day in his life. What the fuck? Never worked a day in my life. I was a male model. You understand that, I fully understand now why he's saying it, because now I know that there has been a 100-year concerted media campaign against the unions. What else is this man who appears to be peering through a hell portal supposed to think? Chomsky sums it up well. Propaganda is to democracy what the bludgeon is to a dictatorship. You know what he's saying there? He's saying that the only reason that that the elite don't beat the public anymore is because they figured out during the steel strikes that it is far easier to brainwash everyone than it is to beat them. I mean, Jamie Packer still has a crack every now and then, but what's the precise tool? Smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum. I want you to think about that quote, and then I want you to think about Q&A, now hosted by TV's Forrest Gump, Hamish MacDonald. Look at how blank his eyes are. Now look at my dogs. There's more going on in his mind and he's a fucking idiot. Anything worse than the panel on Q&A is the fucking... the audience. Look at this. What's he got to add? I'm not an interesting person, but I believe that when I die, my soul will hover over Hobart for a bit. What's the point of this illusion? And it is an illusion. I used to be invited onto SBS and the ABC, and they used to tell you what you can and can't talk about before you went on air. I'd talk about what you can't talk about, and I wasn't invited back. Why do they go through this then? Really, what your parents are watching when they watch Q&A is a really boring WWE Super Slam. Everyone has their little role to play, and it's to give off this nice little song and dance to everybody that every 3 years, everyone gets around a big campfire and they discuss their differences. And it just so happens that 70% of the time we decide to go for a party that represents the mining industry and casinos. It's to give off the illusion that everything is being discussed in a democracy. And then when you point out, no, that's a rigged game, you are inundated with hundreds of comments like Rick saying, "Oi, left-tar! Did it ever occur to you that the reason Labor lost is because their policies are shit?" Rick, don't pretend you read Labor's policies. They're not found in Bacon magazine. You don't have to impress me. I'm impressed enough you know how to write and you're from Cairns. I thought everyone up there communicated through smoke signals puffed exclusively from Holiday cigarettes. 3 locals. Jono's going to BCF. According to this campfire theory, everybody got around the big campfire last year. Sorry, 2 years ago now. And they all decided that the biggest issue facing Australia was franking credits. A niche accounting trick that did not affect 99.4% of the country. It honestly would have made more sense if everyone's primary concern was Bob Catters of not ending up as Crocodile Done dinner. Like, I really do think more people are eaten by crocs than that tax would have changed, right? I'd love it if Annabelle Crabb was doing like we're having dinner with Catter and here's the lecture. What's on the menu? I've got a couple of ideas for the number one spot. What about the fact that under the Liberals, we now have the worst managed economy in the developed world? Well, it'd be worse under Shorten. Oh, touche, Mavis. Well, what about the fact that we also have worse schools than Kazakhstan now? Well, everybody learns on the internet, don't they? Indeed they do. Problem is we have worse internet than Kenya. Yeah, but we've got better internet than Kazakhstan, so it all evens out. Dude, if that was the reason that we voted for a Liberal government 3 times in a row, wouldn't have a problem with it. That actually is democracy in action. But the Liberals weren't running on Liberals beating Kenya in certain areas. You remember why we got rid of the Labor Party? So fucking stupid. Gotta punish them for their horrendous economic track record of being the best economic managers on earth.
Because they were in debt.
Yeah, well, I'm getting to that, dickhead. What, were you in the previous show? I'm gonna ruin it for everyone. How fucking insane was that? That was like if you were the cricket captain and you replaced Brett Lee with Quinton. Well, come on, like, he's a nice guy, but unless his wheelchair looks like this... You know why I put that in as well, right, don't you? That little Warhammer reference? Win back the neckbeards. I didn't win back the neckbeards. Don't you reckon it's exactly this, man? Tau thucked. All right, look. But you're right. That's why we elected the Liberals. Fix the debt. Smallest mandate I've ever seen in my life to win a government. Doesn't have anything to do with the economy. Any economist worth their salt will tell you national debt has nothing to do with economic management. Private debt might, not public debt. But somehow they were going to fix something that had nothing to do with the economy to fix the best managed economy on earth. Oh, okay. Well, how'd you go with the debt? Doubled it. In fact, not only did they double it, they gave us more debt than this nation's had since 1850 combined. They lapped an entire nation's financial history thanks to... Don't you reckon at that point you'd be like, okay, I was duped. It happens to the best of us. I myself used to think the Red Hot Chili Peppers were the best band of all time. Now I'm a little older, I think, what the fuck was I thinking? It's clearly Limp Bizkit. And then in 2016, all of a sudden, even though the debt was so urgent in 2013 with that horrendous track record, no one gives a shit about debt anymore. Now everyone cares about jobs and growth. Fair. Those are at least economic metrics. We're learning. Problem is, the Labor Party has some of the best jobs and growth records on earth, and we went for a party that's record is down there where those countries that have like guys walking around with an accordion and a monkey on their shoulder. It's a real reason I'm upset with Triple J. Where's their Leica version? Haven't you heard enough acoustic covers of Hey Ya? Don't you want to hear, I'm sorry, Miss Jackson, hey? Jobs, growth and debt tumbled in 2 terms. Really down the gurgler. In fact, a lot of those ones, down there with like fucking Jamaica. No one seemed to care in 2019. You sure? You sure the reason you stopped caring about it is because the 1,000 monkeys working at 1,000 typewriters at News Corp stopped typing about it? No. I decided to get scared of taxes that don't exist at the exact moment that the press decided talking about taxes that don't exist. You could make the scare campaign anything. If Labor gets elected, the guy that speaks really loudly on the bus will mistake your bedroom for the bus stop. Every single night. What? No, I can talk. The bus hasn't arrived yet. What? I'm too polite to say anything! Labor, enemy of quiet Australia. Then Albo has to go on the big, every fucking time they lose, big apology tour across Australia. We've learnt our lesson. We're not going to run on taxes we weren't running on because Australians hate tax. Yeah. So much so that they voted for the biggest tax increase in Australian history. 10% tax on everything. Jewellery and luxury yachts excluded, of course, because as we all know, the average Australian doesn't live on Struggle Street. They live on Struggle Dock. Bloody liquid lawn. Caleb tried to mow it the other day, now he's dead! A 10% tax on everything, biggest tax increase in Australian history, and the tax-hating public voted for it twice. The Labor Party was running on it consecutively in 2 elections. Didn't seem to care. Sure, that had absolutely nothing to do with the fact that there was a near total media blackout on the subject. The unions were offering Nine and Murdoch millions to run anti-GST ads, and they refused to run them. Why? Because it's not about money. It's about control. And when I say control, I think the reason everyone thinks it's like out there is because they're imagining some fucking guy at the Easter show with a yo-yo in his hand, right? So much simpler than that. You know when you put a ball in front of a dog and they're like, and you take it behind? That's you. You have the same mind as a mammal, so do I. It's just if something isn't in front of your mind, you don't think about it. Everybody understands this idea when it comes to advertising. Everybody understands that if you see more ads for Blue Haven pools, you're far more likely to think, yeah, I could do with a pool, and whoops, I saw the ad again. Better hope I don't see it a 3rd time, and no, I did. Looks like my bed's going to be a Clark rubber noodle from now on. What's the counter-explanation? Don't you think that makes so much more sense? The press talks about something, everyone's mind goes like, oh yeah, that's the big issue, and then they fucking vote on it. All the other answers that you get from this machine. I heard it on the drum that is then filtered down to every Australian sitting around this specific glass table. We've all been high around that glass table. 2 a.m. in the morning, some chick you don't know, I could eat a whole pizza. Who cares? Maybe the pizza. Wow. This is what this fucking panel... I watched it because I was a masochist, right? They were saying after the election, oh, Kevin Rudd will be quick to dismiss this as Rupert Murdoch's meddling, but what he tends to forget is not everyone reads the Murdoch press. I wouldn't be fucking smug about audience numbers if I was on the drum. Isn't that only telecast on fucking TVs outside Telstra on mute? I turned it up and listened to it. This is what they were saying. Bill Shorten lacked charisma. Yeah. And you could mistake Howard for a former Bond, couldn't you? John Howard, aka Sex God Sanchez. Won against a Prime Minister that was so charismatic he was on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. What was he on the cover of? Slim Dusty Supporters Monthly? Rolling Stone. Usually reserved for the sexiest and most iconic rock stars of the age, like The Doors and Short Stack and soon to be Gary Awesome. But somehow, Bill Shorten couldn't compete with the overwhelming magnetism of the overly Christian father you avoided talking to at all costs when you went over to your best friend's house in primary school. That's why that moment resonated with Australia. We've all been there. You know he was fired from Tourism Australia? How do you fuck that up? How do you make Australia look bad as a holiday destination? Oh. Well, it was a big job, he deserved to sit down. You know, when he was the head of Tourism Australia, he was the one that okayed Where the Bloody Hell Are You, right? That was his baby. That saw a downturn in tourism of 5% in the markets that it was shown. In the markets that it wasn't shown, there was an uptick in tourism. That was his best idea. Can you imagine the ideas that hit the cutting room floor under Scott Morrison? Melbourne, where everyone looks like Judith Lucy. Sydney, worse traffic than Thailand, and everyone's a Canberra, you're not missing out on anything. Adelaide, and people say there's fuck all going on in Canberra. Perth, it's like if everyone from Sydney had no ambition. Hobart, yeah, okay, you can fuck your cousin. No charisma, failing up his entire career, dangerously incompetent, and yet somehow the Australian public determined that he was fit to control the country when he can't control his bowels. Some people think it was because of the excitement of a grand final. I think it was fuck a clown! What I'm saying is, you don't know these people. There's always some dickhead in the audience that's like, that's not true, John Howard visited my primary school. Oh, did he? Well, you know who else I wish visited your primary school? A semi-trailer. Most people will never meet a politician in their lives. Their character is completely at the mercy of the camera. This is why the hero of the Beaconsfield mining disaster is now known as Shifty Shorten. While John Howard is the most trusted Prime Minister we have, despite his most famous quote being a lie. If the press wanted the next Prime Minister to be an African warlord, all they'd have to do is start writing a bunch of headlines saying, Mobutu fires back at corruption charges. Bill short on ammunition. Yeah, that's what I like about Mobutu. What you see is what you get with him. No, Labor just ran a bad campaign. What was so awe-inspiring about the Liberals campaign? The fact that Josh Frydenberg almost kept his human suit together? Wouldn't that be incredible if that happened on Insiders? Let me tell you something about campaigning. Campaigning doesn't mean shit. There was a 1968 study into this with the University of Columbia. They were looking at why people made the decisions they made. Say that the Republicans, for instance, were running on spending cuts and the Democrats were running on healthcare increases. The public thought they were running on defence. Somehow, big coincidence I know, the public's voting intentions were in exact alignment with how much coverage each issue got in the press. In other words, if the press runs on the debt, the public's going to vote on the debt. This should be as crystal clear as the fact that this woman's going to give birth to a baby prematurely that'll have to be kept inside a giant pot of Tooheys Extra Dry to match the conditions of her womb. This is a point that George Orwell is constantly trying to push throughout all of his satires. He who controls information controls democracy, and in this democracy, it's the creator of OG 4chan, because that's all his papers are. Memes, nasty comments from incels. He even looks like Wojak. Oh, thank you. That's very astute. Want to know how the press works on a domestic level? I'm just giving you an outline of how it works throughout the Western world. Here, this is all you need to know about how the public's going to vote. If you want to know what the news is going to talk about tomorrow, read The Australian today. Oh, who said that? Better than what you'll hear on the fucking drum. I actually heard Julia Baird say, oh, well, The Australian only has 100,000 readers. Yeah. What she forgets to mention is she's one of them. As is Alan Jones, Lee Sales, Ben Fordham probably tries to read The Australian and then, oh, pictures, yeah, now I get it. The entire press read The Australian. You know why? They all subconsciously understand this one point, that it's the most well-resourced. Murdoch will run it at a loss, always does. He keeps the most primo journalists in the country there. He gets them to do his bidding, and it's because it's an agenda setter. That is a phrase, that you will hear over and over again when you are looking into media bias literature. They are constantly trying to distract the public with things like, oh my God, what are you talking about? ABC bias to the left. You know, even the head of the ABC said that. Well, let's just for a second pretend that this left-right paradigm fucking exists in the first place and is not just the base level entry into the propaganda model. Ita Buttrose, with her esteemed qualifications of being an animatronic busking shark that sucks up souls instead of shrimp. She's raised millions for the Liberals. That's why she's the head of the ABC now. The entire board is littered with card-carrying Liberals. 60% of the management vote Liberal. And little tidbit, did you know this? The ABC is government-funded. So is the SBS. The government is the Liberal Party. What, do you think they're giving out $1 billion a year to fucking run pro-Labor fucking shit, do you? Like, that'd be pretty counterproductive, wouldn't it? Can you imagine getting on news, nationally broadcast news, and being like, this just in, I think my boss is a bit of a You know, I said that in Canberra and someone said, I called my boss a I asked him what happened. You know what he said? This is true. Got fired. Yet somehow, every bogan that seems to really hate Indonesia, apart from one very specific island of it, they all think that the ABC is left-wing. Let's just even make it what they're trying to say, right? Which is that it's a pro-Labor outlet. Wouldn't fucking matter. This is the second most important quote that Walter Lippmann said in his life. The media is terrible at telling people what to think, but is remarkably successful in telling them what to think about. That's key. Doesn't matter what slant a news outlet has. What matters is who decides what the news is. Remember the magnifying glass metaphor? Whoever is pointing the magnifying glass and saying, you're talking about tax, that's true power. Even if the ABC was pro-Labor, if they come out and say, well, it's technically not a death tax, it's lost the argument already. People are focusing on tax. That's what Chomsky's saying here. This is why when people say like, oh yeah, you know, like when I'm saying, if you read The Australian today, you'll know what the news is talking about tomorrow. I've seen it in real time. It's like looking through the Matrix, right? If you read The Australian, you will know exactly what Lee Sales will be asking Labor politicians that night. I have fucking heard her lift quotes from The Australian and put a question mark at the end. That's her job. The entire press will be doing it. Want more evidence of that? Look at this. This was the last 6 weeks before the 2019 election, summarised into the words that were most used throughout the press. Let's look at them, shall we? Tax, taxes, income, taxation. Where was the magnifying glass pointed? Boom. Tax. And as we know from the 1968 Columbia studies, that means that the entire public is going to be focusing on tax. Right? Look at this. This is where these messages started first coming out. Well, did you look at that? It was from The Australian. A conspiracy invented in the Murdoch press was what the entire press was talking about. When people say to me, I don't read the Murdoch press, therefore I'm not influenced by it, but I just so happen to have the same opinions as the Murdoch press. It doesn't matter that you don't read the Murdoch press. It's not even there for you. It's for them. They're the modern day Chinese messengers carrying around the emperor's message in newspaper. That's all The Australian is to them. It's a fucking script. And they get up and they read it every single day. Sometimes they'll be talking about a couple of bullshit social issues that they differ on, but that's really just to carve up different demographics. When it comes to election time, they'll all be talking about tax. And they'll be talking about it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with no counter-narrative. This is the most controlled media in the developed world. You know when I first did this, and yeah, it all happened like in this first test show. Someone after the show comes up to me and says, my girlfriend broke up with me this morning, and your show is the most depressing thing that happened to me all day. I was reading this essay. From this journalist that was in the Canberra Press Gallery from the 40s to the 90s. He was pretty much just explaining why all the journalists back then used to look like suave members of the Rat Pack, and around the 80s they started looking like backup dancers to the Wiggles. You know what that change was? Journalists used to be from the working class. They used to be the sons and daughters of fucking car salesmen and brickies, and so they used to empathise with the working class. They used to sneak bits of information in. Their editors noticed this. Walter Lippmann, again, father of journalism, biggest contribution to the propaganda model in the 70s, he saw a golden opportunity, which was Watergate. Remember that? No, because you're all fucking 20, but anyway, like, I don't either. But like, what happened was they got rid of Richard Nixon. Before this, the average person did not regard journalists as guardians of democracy. They saw them for the scum they are. They used to understand that's a bank-run paper, that's a casino-run paper. They were more media literate despite being less literate. Nowadays, everybody, because of the 70s, what happened was after Nixon was ousted, which was not, standing up to power. That was because he had an enemies list with half of fucking Washington on it that were thinking, shit, we got to get out of here. Like, we got to get rid of this guy, right? So they allowed the press to get rid of him. And then Walter Lippmann turned this into, the press stands up to power. And that glamorised the industry. What started to happen is they were able to start recruiting people from universities. Now, people around here are always saying, well, I went to university and I got a journalism degree. Yeah, but you went to some shit rural university where your lecturer was a bunyip. They don't care about you. Look at that cafeteria. What do you want for lunch, Dale? Hot chips or curly whirly? You know what else it allowed them to do? Because now it was a sought-after job. It allowed them to start recruiting the children of the elite. People like Shari Markson. Look at her dad. The only question I have about that photo is, was that taken on Epstein's Island? Why did they want the real-life Jemay? Because if she's from the elite class, she's going to empathise with the elite class. She wouldn't know any fucking pensioners. Just in case she did, they wanted the majority of them going through universities. Why? Because he set up how it was taught. They got indoctrinated into it to the fucking dumbfounding position that, you know, when we talked to like Lucy Cormick from the Sydney Morning Herald and her response was like, we're independent. Why? Because the bus stop says that. They believe this shit. Heavily indoctrinated into this. They truly do see themselves as the guardians of democracy. It's a very self-serving image they have of themselves. This point is best typified in the best YouTube video I've ever seen in my life. Look at this title. Noam Chomsky fucks BBC reporter. And he did. Andrew Marr, who looks like a doodle of a 3-year-old would draw of a man, he asked Chomsky, how do you know I'm self-censoring? This is every time I ever get in an argument with a journalist about this, it's like, I get to write what I like. Michael Perini has a really good response to that. You get to write what you like because your owners like what you say. They don't think outside the box at all. They've been completely conditioned into it. The way that Noam Chomsky puts it, I think it's masterclass, right? He says, how do you know I'm self-censoring? Chomsky's response, I don't think you're self-censoring. I'm sure you believe everything you say. But what I'm saying is, if you didn't, you wouldn't be sitting in that chair. I don't know what happens after that. The clip cuts out. I imagine it's Andrew Marr saying, but I... You know, there's only been one Prime Minister that has been elected into office that is on the Labor side in the last 30 years. People always say, what about Julia Gillard? She lost. It was a tie. There was only one that won outright, and he won from opposition, which is infinitely harder. And the more that you look into this, the more you realise, fuck, Kevin Rudd did not win because people got sick of Howard. He won because he's the one. Those two bullets he dodged were John Laws and Alan Jones. Think about all the crazy coincidences that were happening in that cycle. Alan Jones's audience was down by 100,000. Laws's was down so much he was forced to retire because his audience went to that big retirement home in the sky, where they now hang out with everyone they liked while they were alive. So Andrew O'Keefe and that Oz Lotto cat. That's what was going down on AM radio, huge dip. Conversely, there was a second renaissance happening on FM radio because it was just when social media was creeping up and they had the advertising budget to push their shit. And if you're a little older, before social media really kicked off, you'll remember this. All the edgy stuff was being said on FM radio. Just to give you an idea of how much it's changed, right? Like, oh my God, Kyle Sandilands said a celebrity was fat. Dude, now Gen Z cheers me on for saying celebrities are fat. Completely shifted. It was a different time. But what Kevin Rudd realised is, holy hell, there is a huge audience listening to a couple of FM radio stations that are completely apolitical. Why am I going on AM radio and getting my head bashed in day after day? I'll just go on Hamish and Andy. I'll do my little fucking, I know how to make a Skittles and Yo-Go mix. And they'll be like, oh, that's cool. And like, he'll get into the ear of the youth. He understood this. It was a genius move. If you do remember that, I bet the only thing you remember of that election cycle are two themes. There's work choices, or the guy from Rove Live. Can you imagine trying to convince Gen Z to vote for a politician off the coolness of Rove now? Hey kids, you remember Show Me the Movie, right? No? Rove and Sam in the mornings? No? Okay, what about Saturday Rove? John Howard, on the other hand, look at him. Little Hans Mole Man. He didn't know what FM radio was. If he heard a clear, crisp voice in the car, he probably thought, God, is that you? He went on FM radio once. Kevin Rudd went on it 57 times. He won that demo outright. Conversely, again, huge coincidence, no idea why, news audiences across the board plummeted. We're talking 50, 60, 70%. Absolutely nosedived. There was only one news program in the country whose audience was up, and it was up by a massive 70%, and that was Top of the Morning, motherfuckers. People are always saying to me, why do you like Koshy so much? Well, apart from the fact that he wrote Koshy's 101 Ways to Survive in 2009... You know, this is true. I was memeing on that a couple of years ago. It became a bestseller in Adelaide. Proving they really are 10 years behind the rest of us. The other reason that I love Kosh is because when he was the Alan Jones of one election cycle, he gave Kevin Rudd a path to the mainstream. Wasn't pretty. Meanwhile, in print, the head of the Australian... Oh, sorry, there he is, Chris Mitchell. Isn't this a coinky-dink? Isn't this incredible? Chris Mitchell's son... Kevin Rudd was Chris Mitchell's son's godfather. Those are the insane coincidences that have to line up for Labor to even get half a term in this country. You have to have a master media manipulator at the helm like Rudd, and honestly, if he was trying to do it today, he wouldn't be able to do it for the same reason that Joel Turner could not be a household name today. All he did back in the day was go on Australian Idol, make some sounds with his mouth, it impressed Mark Holden, and he's a national treasure now. He's just so lucky that a lyrebird didn't come in after him. Well, he's even better. Put him on the Wheat Beaks box. Back then, you could at least do that little back route that Kevin Rudd did because the youth of Australia was listening to a couple of radio stations. Now they're dispersed out onto hundreds of YouTube channels. Most of them not even focused on Australia. In fact, pretty much all of them. Most of them are your fucking Logan Pauls and your... Who else is big these days? Lemonparty.com. Yeah, that brought you back to year 9, didn't it? You got your occasional Roosevelts or your Curtins. I suppose Ben from Big Brother surprised us and... Is that this man? But unless there's a major... Everything that... Like those two guys, Curtin, Roosevelt, yeah, the press was against them, but there was also a depression and a war that was forcing the public to focus on issues that benefited them. Did you know that since World War I, the party that has been backed by banks the most has won 97% of elections throughout the Western world? They're just the 3% because there was extreme maybe COVID will do it. It doesn't look like it will, though, judging from the current trajectory. Unless there is extreme circumstances, this is the only way into the Prime Minister's chair. And that's the propaganda model. I think about it all the time, and as such, I start thinking to myself, does everyone live in an Escher painting? Because everyone thinks they came to their conclusions themselves. We're all very rational, including myself. The reality of the situation is there was a machine that was built at the turn of the century, and the captains of that machine have been dead for decades, and the people that are in charge of the wheel now are indoctrinated by that very machine and don't even know the machine exists anymore. People are always asking me, what do you do about it? Nothing. Anyway, that's the end of the show. I'll give you your usual of just like, you should listen to Alan Austin, Michael West, Independent Australia, and of course, King Prawn. Yeah. He's telling it like it is. They're the ones that are constantly focusing the magnifying glass back to where it should be, on things that actually matter, because the main trick of the press is to make the trivial important and the important trivial. They're the ones that are constantly talking about the actual matter, things at hand, like major corruption, environmental degradation. They are bringing the magnifying glass back to that. That's why you have to listen to them. Because you are a little miniature newspaper to your friends and family, and you have to be informed in these things. I mean, like, I'll let you off if something really big happens, like Chappelle Corby pole vaults back into a Balinese prison. Because she forgot she left an ounce in there. But then it's back to business. Because when 40% of the population says they're interested in the next election, that's when Labor gets elected. When it's 38-39, you get results like 1998 and 2016. Anything below that, the Liberals win in a landslide. So the game, the main game of the press, is to make sure that no one's paying attention to what matters. To make it boring, so it kind of just seeps into your head. You're like, oh, there's an election, taxes, and you just go on with your day. That's what they're constantly trying to push for. There's this... I really cannot tell you how smart Walter Lippmann and Edward Bernays were. I was reading recently that they were petitioning and really pushing for all these media moguls back in the day to start putting sport and fashion in the papers. Why? Because it's fucking meaningless. These aren't stupid people. I used to think that people that were into sport were fucking morons, but then I was sitting around with some of my Dero friends the other day and they were talking about sports bet. I was like, fuck, sports bet is just bogan stock market. They have such intricate knowledge. You'd be like, oh fuck, Fitty broke his ankle, sell, sell, sell. These are smart people. As much as I think that Lippmann and Bernays are geniuses, I honestly think that sports commentators like Sterlo and Rabbits are even smarter. The exotic information that they have about the game is unbelievably impressive. It's just that they spend all their time trying to figure out if this fucking ball made it over the line. But can you imagine if they shifted their mighty intellect, just 1% of it, onto politics? We'd have an answer to the Kennedy assassination. Oh, I'm telling you, Sterlo, I'm just not seeing that second shot. And nah, mate, it's definitely there. Just going to super slow-mo and there it is! Second gun! Second gun! Unbelievable! Thank you very much, Newcastle. Thanks, guys.